Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start, Scott, with the Israeli attack on Iran. Day before Iran and the United States were supposed to talk and to do something about the Iranian nuclear program. How did it start, and how did you find the way that Israeli started the war?
Well, let me just say this straight up. And you know this. I blame Iran in many ways for the predicament it's found itself in. And I'll tell you why. Because you wave a red flag in front of the Israeli bull. And then what? You're surprised that the bull charges. As you know, and I've articulated on this show several times, Iran had no justification to have 60% enriched uranium, none whatsoever. It made them a nuclear threshold state. While it might have been lawful, it was stupid because it allowed people to articulate that Iran could be positioned itself to have nuclear weapons, which is the argument used to justify this strike. Iran made multiple statements about, that we have all the pieces necessary if the decision was made. The supreme leader has agreed that the fatwa that prohibits nuclear weapons could be changed if certain conditions were reached. And this just fed into the people saying Iran is a nuclear threat. To give you an example, General Kurilla, the head of Central Command, has just briefed the president on what I just said, that Iran had sufficient stockpiles of 60% enriched uranium. That meant they were just one enrichment cycle away from having fissile material, and they had the technological base that could be used to produce a nuclear bomb. Therefore, we must assume that Iran is pursuing a nuclear bomb. Now, and because I've been on with Professor Mirande, who I have the deepest respect for, but I've said this over and over again, and I've said it. So I'm extraordinarily frustrated by this because this was a predictable event. Now, to Iran's credit, they were trying to negotiate in good faith to get out of this. Iran was willing to give up all of its 60% enriched uranium. Iran was ready to accept caps on its enrichment capacity at 3.75%, that necessary to make fuel for the Bushehr reactor and whatever reactors Iran might be getting. They're willing to find ways to deal with their excess enrichment capability, to include the concept of, foreign involvement in a fuel bank. They were willing to work with the Russians. They were willing to allow U.S. inspectors on the ground in Iran as part of the IAEA inspection team, something they had never allowed. All of this, their lead negotiator, Ali Shamkhani, a close advisor to the supreme leader, to the president, was on TV just 2 days before the Israeli attack, saying, "Yeah, we're ready to sign a treaty that says no nuclear weapons." So Iran did all the right things after getting themselves in a very difficult situation. I think Iran realized that they had pushed it up to this concept of a threshold capability up as far as they could go, that they stopped waving the red flag. They started to withdraw from the ring. But it was too late. Israel, recognizing this, launched their attack. Because if Shamkhani had been allowed to meet with Witkoff and they had come up with an agreement on Sunday, politically it would have been impossible for Israel to attack. But the other thing I think we're also finding out is that while Witkoff may have been negotiating in good faith, Donald Trump wasn't. That Donald Trump was always using this negotiation process as a mechanism to buy time and build justification for an Israeli intervention. And Donald Trump is the one who told the Iranians, Sunday is the critical day. That's why Shamkhani was on TV saying, we're ready. We're ready to bring this thing to fruition. We're ready to seal the deal. We're ready to do what is necessary to avoid this, any potential conflict. And Trump set them up. Meanwhile, Trump was working with the Israelis to attack. And we know this. We know it. One, Trump has pretty much admitted it. But two, David Kurilla, the same general that I just spoke about, briefed the president prior to the Israeli action that the United States military was prepared to execute a range of military options against Iran. That meant right now. You can't make that briefing knowing that Israel is going to attack without knowing that you have to deconflict. That means that the U.S. attack plan was fully deconflicted with the Israeli attack plan. And the president knew this. We knew this attack was going to take place, this Pearl Harbor event. And I use that Pearl Harbor event term because it's important. This was a surprise attack. There's no justification for this attack under international law. If Israel wants to declare their right to preemptive self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, then they need to articulate that. They need to go to the United Nations and the Security Council and confront the Security Council with the threat, the imminent threat posed by Iran. But you can't make that case when Iran is in the process of negotiating with the United States to eliminate the things that made that threat imminent. Israel has no justification. Their concept of preemptive strike is legally flawed. They are a criminal entity here. They are guilty of the greatest war crime possible, and that is to execute a war of aggression, which is what Israel has done here. They started a war of aggression, and the United States is complicit because we facilitated it. We worked with them. We are culpable just as they are in this. And I think the Israelis and Donald Trump believed that they were going to launch a shock and awe campaign, decapitate. They killed Shamkhani. They killed the negotiator. And they killed senior Iranian military officials. And I think they believed that by decapitating the Iranian leadership and then hitting Tehran and the nuclear sites with this shock and awe explosions, that Iran would collapse like a house of cards. Instead, what they got is the harsh reality of Iranian retaliation, which is ongoing and devastating to Israel.
When it comes to the initial hours of the attack, Israeli attack on Iran, can we say what has happened to Iranian defense system? Why it took time to respond to Israel?
Well, I think any military person understands that when you put your military on high alert, that is not something you can sustain indefinitely. So you normally don't raise your high alert status until you believe that there is the real potential that you're going to be under attack. Iran was told that there's no danger of attack. Iran was told that there's a negotiation taking place. Iran was preparing for that negotiation. Now people can say how immature and how this and how that. Well, you know what? You're not Iranian. I mean, I know you are, but you're not an Iranian government official. You don't have the burden of responsibility of a nation on your shoulders. And I believe the Iranian government honestly believed that this negotiation was going to happen, that this negotiation was the critical juncture. Now, had that negotiation gone bad, then Iran would have elevated its posture. But you can't maintain a high level of readiness indefinitely. And so I just think the Iranians, had allowed themselves to be lulled into a false sense of complacency. I also believe that the Israelis are pretty damn good at what they do. I mean, they had apparently a massive series of drone factories and throughout Iran that were used to launch these decapitation strikes. Again, if I think it was on your show, Nima, where I confronted Professor Morandi about this. If you remember, I said that the assassination of Haniyeh was done by a Mossad drone. I said, what the hell? How does that happen? Do you not understand that Israel now has the capacity to take out your leadership in a preemptive strike? I predicted this very thing on this show with Professor Morandi. I said Israel will use drones to carry out a preemptive strike. Why Iran wasn't able to safeguard themselves or to do something to prevent this, I don't know. But the Israelis are pretty damn good. These are the same guys that infiltrated Hezbollah, got pagers in there, and took out, a good chunk of Hezbollah's intermediate leadership. These are the guys that found out where Nasrallah was and killed him. So you don't have to support Israel to understand that their intelligence services are very good, and their air force is very good, with very good pilots, very good aircraft, very good munitions. And so if Iran's asleep at the wheel, believing there's going to be a negotiation on Sunday, Israel gets a clean shot. and that's what they did. They got a very clean shot in there. It did a lot of damage, but it wasn't a knockout punch. I mean, I'm always reminded of, I tell people, you don't want to go up to Mike Tyson in his prime and try to cold cock him, because if you don't knock him out and he looks at you, you're in a lot of trouble. Israel didn't knock Iran out. Iran is the equivalent of Mike Tyson in its prime. And Iran now has pivoted back on Israel and making Israel pay a price.
Scott, you mentioned that they were planning. It seems that many of our guests are suggesting that Israel was planning this attack for years. And if we assume that, and what has happened in Russia, it seems that they help Ukraine to go and attack Russia as well, because it was the same sort of strategy, bringing the drones and just somehow using the drones against. Don't you think that it's a somehow what they're doing, it's somehow against a broader picture? It's not just a local conflict. It's not just about Russia and Iran. It's bigger than that. And the way that they convinced Donald Trump is because of the bigger picture. They could convince Donald Trump with that.
Well, I don't want to say that Israel alone did this. For instance, we know that the British have very, very close relations with the Ukrainians. In fact, I think the Ukrainian drone operation was actually a British operation. But what this suggests to me is that there's interaction between the British and the Israelis as well, and the United States. That the Mossad doesn't necessarily operate in a vacuum. So what we're looking at here is that there is a cabal of intelligence services that conspire against targets of mutual interest, whether it be Russia or it be Iran. Remember, the Stuxnet virus attack against the Iranians was a joint American-Israeli operation. It was eventually executed by the Israelis without the permission of the United States, by the way, but it was developed jointly. I believe that the concept of using drones as a hybrid force multiplier is one that is collectively conceived and collectively prepared for, but maybe individually executed, meaning that the Ukrainians executed that operation inside Russia and the Israelis executed this operation inside Iran. But the concept and the preparation, the planning, the support, I think it's done collectively. I think there's this collective cabal of intelligence organizations that are working together to achieve outcomes around the world that are beneficial to all the parties involved. It's in Ukraine's interest to see Iran degraded, given the support that Iran has provided to Russia. And therefore it's in Mossad's interest to keep Ukraine, satisfied that this is, a part of the world that Ukraine should be focusing its energies on, as opposed to being solely, you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of thing. So I think that it's not as easy just to say the Mossad is doing it all. The Mossad is good, but it's not that good. The Mossad can't function outside of Israel without liaison intelligence services. At least they can't function fully. So I think what we're looking right now is, collaboration as opposed to Mossad domination.
And looking at what Israel is attacking Iran is, if we separate the initial hours of their attack into mostly, if you look at what has happened in Iran, it's just 80% of what has happened was before, in the initial hours. And after that, they didn't do that much. They're trying to do terrorist acts in Iran, as you've mentioned about this network of terrorists and who are preparing, producing drones and all of that. But Iran's intelligence is just capturing what is, you follow the Iranian media, you see how they're just getting these people, how they're finding these people who are collaborating with Israel. As time goes by, I think they're gonna go weaker inside Iran. And how they can continue the conflict if that goes in that direction, and with the way we know that the air defense systems are not working the way we knew about it before, but it's somehow many audience, many people out there, they don't know what is the capability of the air defense system of Israel. How can you explain this situation as time goes by if this war turns into a war of attrition?
Yeah, Israel delivered a Sunday punch in its Pearl Harbor attack on Iran. But as you pointed out, the vast majority of the strikes that were done, especially in Tehran, were carried out by drones, not by Israeli aircraft. The notion that Israel has air superiority over Iranian airspace is largely an Israeli propaganda ploy, trying to demoralize the people of Iran. Because remember, we're not looking at a campaign that's focused on, neutralizing Iran's nuclear capability. We're looking at a regime change operation. From the Western perspective, the perspective of Israel, this operation will not be deemed complete and successful until the theocracy that governs Iran is eliminated. So this is an existential struggle for Israel. So a lot of what's going on right now is propaganda. The way Israel postures this conflict. I mean, I have to laugh. Mario Nafal has just become, he's an influencer on X, and he's just become a mouthpiece of this Israeli pro-Israeli propaganda exercise, where he just literally uses the same verbiage. I mean, one thing you're taught as a journalist, if you want to be truly objective, is never become prisoner to the lexicon of any given side. But so he's, Israel's hammering this, and the Iranians are, melting away. I mean, it's pathetic. And then he just puts out deliberately deceptive videos. You've been to Tehran. You've seen Tehran traffic at rush hour. Now, imagine you getting up there and taking a photograph of, Highway 7 or whatever, the belt road around Tehran at rush hour of, traffic parked in. Well, that's sort of like a daily occurrence, twice a day perhaps. And yet, they're publishing this out there saying Iranians are fleeing Tehran. They're scared. Now, I've spoken to Iranians in Tehran, and I'm sure you have as well. They're scared. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be scared when you have a nuclear-armed superpower saying the citizens of Tehran must evacuate? When Israel, with a track record of the Dahiwa principle of collective punishment, is now threatening to do the same thing against the Iranians. I mean, so of course they're afraid, but the notion that Iran is on the cusp of collapse, I think is not an accurate assessment of the situation. So there's a lot of propaganda at play here. The Israelis clearly have the capacity to launch standoff weapons, and those weapons can penetrate to some extent the Iranian air defense, and they are striking strategic targets. Israel is able to get localized air superiority over given targets at a given point in time. For instance, Natanz, where they have been very successful in dropping very heavy bunker busting bombs on that facility. They've done so at Isfahan. They've done so, at Tabriz, and other locations. We have to give Israel its due. They are successful, but it doesn't mean that they're having the dominance, the success there. Iran was taken by surprise. In a tactical sense, even an operational sense, but not in a strategic sense. Iran has been preparing for this conflict for a long time, and the military preparation is manifest today with the decisive retaliation. But I'd also like to bring another factor up. I don't know what the Iranians have done, but I know they're smart. During Desert Storm, I was heavily involved in the targeting aspects of what we were doing with the strategic air campaign, especially when it came to the weapons of mass destruction facilities. And so before we would bomb any site in Iraq, I was part of the people preparing that package. And then after the bombing was done, I was responsible for doing the analysis on whether or not we achieved our operational objectives at a given site. And the way we did this is we evaluated the site, we evaluated what was in the site, what we wanted to achieve by that. And then we said, if the following visual cues can be made regarding impacts, we can assume that if the bomb hit where we wanted it to hit, that it achieved a certain level of destruction inside the site. And I remember looking at various sites throughout Iraq saying, we have achieved destruction, total destruction based upon the visual cues. Then later I went to Iraq as a weapons inspector, and I'd go to these same sites. And I'm talking about within months of the war ending. So the targets are freshly destroyed. And what we saw is the sites were emptied. And then later on, what we found out is that these sites had been emptied and evacuated to places that we didn't know about, we didn't bomb. And what the Iraqis told me several times is, we're really good at pouring concrete. You guys are pretty good at blowing up concrete. We're pretty good at pouring concrete. The problem is you ain't blowing up what you think you're blowing up. And they would return the equipment, they rebuild the building, return the equipment, and it was back up to running the way it was before the war started. The point I'm trying to make is, if you think that in Isfahan, in the metallurgy facility, that transforms uranium yellow cake into uranium hexafluoride for feedstock and such, if you think the critical equipment, I'm not talking about the big infrastructure stuff that can't be moved, I'm talking about the critical equipment. If you think that was still there when the Israelis bombed it, you're high. Firdos. Firdos is an underground facility, but originally Firdos was part of a series of evacuation sites created by the Iranians. They pre-built these underground facilities to evacuate.
Yeah, the correct pronunciation is Fordo.
Of course it is, but I am a Marine and I'm allowed to mispronounce any word in the world and not be accused of insulting people. Thank you for correcting me. But I spent I don't know how many weeks mispronouncing the I'm going to miss Baba Mandeb straight. I fumbled that like you wouldn't believe, till I finally one day got it right, and then it created a stir on the internet that Scott Ritter finally said it correctly. So Fordo.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I apologize. I got it wrong. But that site, the one that begins with an F and sounds like Fordo, what didn't start out as a alternative enrichment facility. It started out as just an evacuation site, one of many Iran has prepared all around the country, all of which are underground and hardened. I have a funny feeling that the vast majority of things that Israel is bombing don't contain what Israel thinks they contain. That the very sensitive equipment has been withdrawn, evacuated, and awaiting the time when this campaign is over and Iran can prove how good they are at pouring concrete, rebuilding facilities, and then reconstituting this program. That the perception that Iran's nuclear program can be eliminated by bombing is a false perception, a totally false perception. That the vast majority of this equipment, the sensitive equipment, is in locations that Israel doesn't know about, the United States doesn't know about, and that you're basically bombing, empty sites, doing damage. There's no doubt about it. They're doing damage, and they may be, interdicting some critical infrastructure, which means there could be a delay in the reconstitution of this program. But the idea that you've eliminated this program through bombing has always been a false dream, And I think that's the case today, that not only is Israel not achieving what it wants to achieve, it's creating the conditions for its own demise, because Israel's getting weaker. Iran is rounding up these drones, the Mossad networks that are doing this. I mean, it was amazing the other day. You saw the video of the giant building full of drone parts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there was hundreds of millions of dollars worth. That might be an exaggeration. There was a lot of money of equipment located in that facility, and to build that facility took time. The cover story, the people to make this thing
10
operate.
years, Scott, 10 years. These people who are right now, they were captured by the Iranian intelligence. They're talking about 10 years cooperating with Israel.
Yeah. And so this is a huge loss for Israel, because you don't, if it's 10 years, you don't immediately replicate it. All right, well, we lost a couple of our drone boys. Let's go ahead and readily reconstitute this. You can't. And these people had deep cover stories. These people were thoroughly integrated into Iranian society to escape detection. That capacity is gone, and you don't regenerate that, not overnight. And so Israel is just going to get weaker and weaker. Now, the Israelis have said come Thursday and Friday, they're going to do something that's going to shock everybody. And in my mind, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the Israelis have another capacity. I mean, maybe phones will start blowing up. Maybe, who knows? I know that Professor Morandi was advised to get rid of his phone. And hopefully he has done this, and hopefully other people have done that as well. Change your pattern of life. Do something to make sure that whatever happens on Thursday and Friday, if it happens, doesn't achieve the outcomes that they want. But there's no doubt in my mind that the Israelis have another trick up their sleeve that they're going to try. But these are tricks. This isn't war. This is trickery. You don't win wars with flashy one-of games. You win wars with sustained military capacity, and Israel is running out of its ability to, launch a sustained air campaign. I always said, and I've said this for many years, that while Israel can initiate a bombing campaign against Iran, it can't sustain it. It lacks the military capacity to sustain this. And as a result, it's like, having a plan for a hornet's nest. All right, guys, because I did this as a child. We're going to cut off the hornet's nest. We're going to bring it into the garage, and then we're going to spray it with water. That was the plan. And then we did it, and we sprayed it with water, and all the hornets came running out. And that was the end of our plan. We were running for our lives. We didn't know how to contain the hornets once they came out. And that's what Israel has done here. They chopped off the hornet's nest, they brought it into the garage, and they sprayed it down with a hose. And now they're getting stung, and they don't have a plan. And they need Papa Ritter to come home from work to resolve this issue, which Papa Ritter did. They need the United States to bail them out, and the U.S. isn't ready to jump in just yet. Israel's going to lose this war if the current circumstances stay. There's just no doubt about it. Israel is going to lose this war because Iran's not going down. Iran has the capacity to suffer pain that Israel doesn't. People shouldn't forget. We always talk about the Russians and their World War II history. Russia, the Soviet Union suffered 27 million, and they didn't quit. They rode it out. They won the war, and that's all true. Iran fought an 8-year war with Iraq, where they lost millions of people. The capacity of Iran to absorb pain is beyond imagination. Beyond imagination. Israel can't absorb this pain, and they won't absorb this pain. This is why they shut down. They won't let Israelis flee right now. If you recall, we had conversation about how Israel loses the war with Hamas. And what I said is that Israel loses when the quality of life in Israel becomes unbearable for the Israeli population. And we're talking about a very spoiled population that has inflated expectations of what life should be in Israel, in the land of milk and honey. And when you have a situation where you get economic collapse that brings about societal collapse and political dysfunction, people are just going to wake up one morning and go, it's just not worth to live in Israel anymore, and they're going to leave. Israel shut its borders. Why? You can't live in Israel anymore. It's not just that life has become inconvenient. It's become insufferable. I mean, we are looking at Israeli neighborhoods being transformed into Gaza, which is why we don't have too much sympathy for the Israelis when they cry about this, except the difference is the Iranians aren't trying to kill Israeli civilians. This isn't a, reverse Daiwa principle. This isn't collective punishment. For all the destruction that Iran has done, what, the number of Israeli dead is 13? 13? I mean, if you were trying to actually harm the Israeli population, the number of dead right now should be in the thousands, because that's what the Israelis have done to Gaza, hundreds of thousands, possibly, when they attacked Beirut, and in the collective punishment principle, thousands are dead. Iran, with all of the destruction that they've done, killed 13 people. Meanwhile, Israel, what's the number now of dead Iranians? It's in the hundreds. So, it's,
they killed much more civilians. Yeah.
Much more. I mean, it's tragic. The stories coming out. The one apartment complex came down, 20 some odd children killed, 60 family members, all civilians, done deliberately, targeted deliberately by Israel, because they wanted to get a scientist. That's the sickness of the Israeli mind. We're going to kill a scientist, as if that's going to solve anything. But to kill the scientist, we not only will kill his family, but the family of everybody who lives in the apartment complex there. This is criminal. This isn't legitimate, but Iran's not doing the same thing to Israel. They give plenty of advance notice. The alarms go off. People go to the shelters, and the destruction is generally limited to the vicinity of a legitimate target that Iran is taking out. But the bottom line, though, is Israel is becoming a place where people can't live. They've taken out the gas production facility in Haifa. I don't know when they're going to take out Ashdod, but when they do, Israel goes lights out. They've taken out the port facility in Haifa. They've taken out Ben Gurion Airport. They've, the Iranian, and just, what is it, this morning, they took out very sensitive intelligence facilities. Precision strike. Israel will lose this war if it continues on this trajectory. And this is why Israel is so desperate to get the United States to intervene. But even American intervention doesn't guarantee a positive outcome for Israel. At some point in time, the border restrictions are going to be lifted, and you're going to see millions of Israelis flee this destroyed nation. And when that happens, that's the end of Israel.
Yesterday, I talked with Professor Ted Postel. He mentioned, we were talking about the way that Israel, if Israel is capable of destroying Iranian nuclear program, or nuclear sites. And he mentioned something about the structure, the form structure, diamond-like structures that they can be used in these sort of facilities. And he said the direct impact on this structure, they're not going to penetrate that much. Even the best bomber of the United States is 61 meter to penetrate. And it's totally, in his assessment, even going with the idea of destroying Iranian nuclear program by these bombers, it's delusional. He was technically, he was explaining how it was a failure from the beginning. And do you think that these people who are trying to convince Donald Trump to participate in the conflict, do they really believe that they can destroy it by the bombers, and that the United States possess? Maybe Israel doesn't have them.
Yes, I think they're that delusional. I mean, realistically, there should be somebody like me somewhere in the system who says, hey, guys, I just want to remind you, back in November of last year, we took 2 B-2 bombers. We put the big bunker busters on them. We flew them against targets in the Houthi. Remember that, all that briefing, guys? Where we came in and said, why are we doing this? Because we're sending a signal to Iran. This is deterrence. By blowing up these Houthi facilities using this big bunker buster, we're sending a signal to Iran. That'll help us in our negotiating position. Except we dropped the bombs on the 2 Houthi underground targets, and they didn't do anything. Bounced right off. And those Houthi facilities aren't buried to the extent that Fordo is. She said Fordo's what, 95 meters underground or feet underground. This bunker buster can take 50, 60 meters. That's not enough. It's not enough. The only weapon we have that can do this is the B-12, the B-61-12. That's our nuclear bomb that's designed to do bunker busting. That can do it. Take out 120 feet, I believe. But do we want to use nuclear weapons? And here's the other. We got jammed. Are you back?
Yeah.
I
It seems
started
that
talking about nuclear weapons, and the FBI went crazy. They're like, "Oh, shut them down! Shut them down!" We may get them coming through the door any minute now. I'm convinced it's going to happen again because I've just gone full. Trump is horrible for the American people and what he's doing. But the bottom line is, even if we take out Fordo, as I told you, the heart of the program. First of all, the heart of the program is in the brains of the people implementing it. Most of the people they're killing, sadly, are just the names that they know, who are retired. I mean, I've seen the interviews where they're saying, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm back. I'm sort of like, I'm making tea and picking pomegranates with my family. It's the next generation of scientists." So they're killing the wrong people, but it's still a criminal concept. You can't kill the knowledge. The knowledge is forever embedded in Iran, forever. You can't kill it. The technology, first of all, once you know how to do something, over time with sufficient resources, you can reconstitute. But some of the technology, the critical technology, is being preserved in evacuation sites. So even if you took out Fordo, you just took out the cascades that are there, if they're still there. I believe they are, because I think it's basically a facility that's deemed to be safe. But that's not the only place. The cascades, the IR6s and IR8s, they exist elsewhere. You're not destroying all of these. You're not destroying the metallurgy capacity. You're not destroying conversion capacity. You're not destroying everything. You're just destroying shells that can be filled with technology, and the shells can be rebuilt, filled with technology. And the other thing that is going to guarantee is that if Iran survives this, never again will they allow facilities to exist in such an exposed manner, that the totality of this program will go underground. So we've just made a huge mistake here, a huge mistake. We need to pray that we can get the Iranians to agree to a negotiated outcome.